It's just interesting seeing the strategies people use to be able to stand out. And I think more than most other markets around North America, there's a lot of competition. So if you are going to be getting into that market, you just need to really have your systems and your processes dialed in to be able to stand out enough to capture those bookings that are coming in.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odom and Steven Silverman.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odom, along with Steven Silverman. Steven, we are peak season right now. Not industrial market season or retail.
Well, we're that too, but it's winter time and we're in Florida. So guess who's coming to Florida?
Yep. Guess who's showing up for dinner?
It's vacationers.
Yeah, the Canadians.
That's right. So, but that's a good time for us to examine the short-term rental market. It's an important part of the economy in Florida, and interest rates have risen. Lots of markets have changed. It's time to just revisit again what's going on in this market in Airbnb and other short-term rentals.
Yeah, and it's not really the vacation market, whether it be rentals or Mickey Mouse, is robust. And it doesn't really matter what the Fed is doing. The Fed's trying to crush the economy. And I'm not sure where we're going to end up. If I had a crystal ball, Steven, I wouldn't be having to see you every day. I'd be on my $100 million yacht.
That's right.
Or on my private jet. But unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't really know where the Fed's taking us. And I know they've got a blunt instrument, and we're seeing the effects of that throughout segments of the real estate market. In the vacation market, from rentals to visits to flights, we're full, we're booked, things are happening, the market's robust, and we haven't talked about the vacation rental market in a couple of years. So it's going to be good to get a little update from folks outside of our area, what they think about what's happening inside our market, and discuss that.
And it's not a market to be minimized either. It can be a really great investment if it's done right.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's one of those markets. We talked about on a previous podcast about so many real estate investors, but they did a number of small, let's say, offices. Dock in a Box, for example, was a doctor's condo. And those were, sort of a method for small investors to get in and have a stable return that were outside of the single family home market. And that business has been taken away. I could go down the line of, Obamacare killed that one. But, markets change, and we've seen a lot of asset classes get nipped, their fruitfulness be nipped in the bud a little bit. And, this one is, on the vacation side, has really been, emerging. It's made a lot of millionaires. And as it's, really over the last 15 to 20 years, and Florida got a head start on that and is a little bit more mature than some of the other markets. But before we get into our guest, wanted to read a review. Can I read a review, Steven?
I think read a review because let's hear what someone else has to say.
Yeah, just me, prattling on. So Oscar Tuazon, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from the Philippines, says, full of valuable information and insight. I really enjoy listening to your podcast and continuing expanding my knowledge. Thanks so much and keep up the great work. Oscar, we really appreciate that input. I think, Steven, this is our first Asian, forget about the Philippines, this is our first Asian review. We've had some European reviews, right?
That's right.
So kudos for Oscar to be the first Filipino reviewer. So we thank you for taking the time to do that. Guys, this show, and we talk about it every episode, is a challenge. It's tough for us to produce and get guests that we feel are meaningful, that are going to talk about the Florida market, because that's what sets us apart from the many other podcasts that are out there. And we probably contact 5 people to get one person to come on the show. So it's a lot of work. And you help us by leaving those reviews. So folks like, Oickle leaving us that review is very, very beneficial. It shows that people are paying attention and they care, and it helps us to attract more content that you guys would find valuable. Stephen, anything else before we roll into our guests?
No, let's roll into the short-term rental market. Today we have with us James Svetec and Riley Oickle. They are the co-owners of B&B Inner Circle based in Canada. James is an Airbnb expert. He is an investor and a coach. He got his start in short-term rental space by managing some of the most successful short-term rental properties in downtown Toronto. Riley is also a Canadian real estate investor, and he specializes in multifamily residential investing. After building a successful maintenance company, Riley transformed into real estate investing and started buying income properties around the southwestern area of Ontario. Today, they both have a coaching company where they help people be successful in Airbnb and short-term rentals. So, Riley and James, welcome to the Invest Florida show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
No, guys, we really appreciate you investing time with us today. James, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about how you got here and why you're doing what you're doing?
For sure. Yeah. Well, so I got started actually managing other people's properties on Airbnb and short-term rental. That was one of the businesses that I started up about 7 years ago, and then did that for a while quite successfully and got to know the Airbnb and short-term rental space really well. Built up some authority in this space. I ended up writing the Airbnb for Dummies book. And then Riley was a colleague of mine before all that. And so he and I kind of reconnected. And while I had been out going and becoming an expert at the Airbnb side of things, Riley had been going out and becoming an expert at the real estate investing side of things. And so naturally things kind of just came together and we started working together and buying short-term rental properties. And that's where we're at now.
When you say you were colleagues, where were you colleagues?
Just at a company that we actually both worked at before either one of us went and started our own businesses.
Gotcha. And what industry were you guys in?
So that was a painting company, like residential and commercial painting.
Gotcha. And so Riley, it's similar for you, your path, or what was your path to get where you are right now?
Yeah, of course. So like James mentioned, I ran that like home maintenance company. And then right after that, I ended up getting my foot in the door with a pretty large real estate investor in Ontario who took me under his wing, I like to say. And that was my foot in the door for really learning how to analyze properties, acquire them, do the renovation, the property management. And so recently after that, I ended up doing some creative financing and bought 16 properties over the next 2 years, most of which were like multifamilies. And then most recently, some single family Airbnbs.
Gotcha.
So just to our listeners can geographically place you, you're based in Canada, but you're working with people in the Florida market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're based in Canada, and then we work with a whole bunch of students that we coach on short-term rental investing. And now a large majority of them, honestly, probably about 80% are based down in the United States. So we've got Florida is obviously a really popular and well-established market as far as the US goes for short-term rentals. So a number of the people that we work with are investing down in Florida.
Now, we talked earlier, and you guys were talking about the Orlando market and Miami. I think you've done some research on the Orlando market. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in the Airbnb market there, and any way you can enlighten us on what's happening on the vacation market there?
Sure. Yeah. So what's really interesting about that, like the whole pocket right around Disney is a pretty interesting one. It's been pretty interesting the last couple of years, especially just with Disney closing down and everything going on there. There was some disruption there for sure, and different pockets throughout Florida and really just different pockets around the whole of North America kind of did well, where you saw like a lot of areas around national parks and kind of tourist destinations that people could get away to for like a staycation did really well. But in normal times, Orlando and everything around Disney tends to be like just a really stable area, but increasingly competitive. One of the things that's really interesting is like looking at properties in that area. Hosts tend to really go above and beyond. Like you have to do a lot to make a property stand out. It's not enough to just have a nice place. Like you're seeing lots of properties that have Disney themed rooms that have all kinds of games going on that like really go above and beyond. And so it's just interesting seeing the strategies people use to be able to stand out. And I think more than most other markets around North America, there's a lot of competition. So if you are going to be getting into that market, you just need to really have your systems and your processes dialed in to be able to stand out enough to capture those bookings that are coming in.
So I think most real estate investors have at least considered, your typical single family home investor, even your multifamily folks, have considered the vacation rental market. What would be the ones who haven't necessarily dipped their toe in the market? What would you tell those experienced investors that are considering to get into it that, hey, these are the 2 or 3 biggest things that you really need to consider when you're making a transition or buying a property that you intend to put it as a vacation rental?
So I would say like the couple of things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing a short-term rental would be making sure that you're definitely maximizing the upside as much as you possibly can. So when you're doing your analysis, like James had mentioned, like thinking about how can you stand out from the competitors? What amenities do you put into place? What, example would be like games. Something that we do, obviously up here in Canada where it's a bit colder than in Florida, is we have hot tubs or we have saunas for amenities. So you really have to be strategic in the competition and making sure that you're competing. So maximizing the upside, but also running the numbers for the downside. So what that looks like right now is with the interest rates increasing pretty well just across North America, we're looking at, well, what's the worst case scenario? And so when we're running our numbers, we usually use AirDNA, and we'll run our numbers there for projected annual revenue. And we'll run our numbers and look at what's the bottom line number, like the absolute bottom revenue number for the property, where we can still get the ROI that we're looking for. And, in the worst case, like if we just can't even operate this as a short-term rental to hit that minimum standard, in the worst case with interest rates rising or the competition beating us out, how would the property still do as a long-term rental? So we really look at, can we flip this from a long-term rental to a short-term rental, and then maybe from a short-term rental to a long-term rental? Because we want other options. The other thing is like maybe there's going to be some licensing in place in the major urban centers across Florida. So we want to really make sure that we can pivot into even a medium term or a long term. So yeah, those are the main 2 things to look at, is how do we maximize the upside and then mitigate that downside.
And how about your maintenance and property management? If you're a Canadian investor looking to buy in the Orlando market, how are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, so there's really 2 different routes you can go. It depends on if you want to self-manage, which I generally recommend for people that are looking to get into this as a solid investment and they want to build a larger portfolio, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties. Or if you want to just hire a professional property manager. And that tends to be more ideal for people that are looking at this as more of a lifestyle play, where it's an investment, but also a lifestyle asset they want to own, or if they just want to own one. Because what we found is that it's quite easy, honestly, to set up the right systems and team members, even if you are remote and you're doing so at a distance, to have the property managed effectively. And you can pay a lot less doing it in-house than hiring it out and paying a 10, 20, 30% management fee, depending on the market. But it takes legwork to set that stuff up. Obviously it's a lot easier when you're first getting started to just hire a management company, one company that's going to do all that, versus going out and individually finding maintenance people, finding a cleaning team, finding someone to do your guest communication for you. So that's a big part of it, is just making sure that whichever direction you go, whether it is outsourcing to a property manager or taking care of it in-house, that you have the right team members set up and just picking the path that actually is best suited for you.
So can you just give us a bird's eye view for somebody who might have, just say, a 3-bedroom condo? Like, how would it compare if, as an investment, if they used Airbnb or they did a long-term rental? What's the differential in the return?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the one thing that we always look at, just at a very bird's eye view at the macro, is we'll look at the expected revenue, like just say monthly revenue of it as a short-term rental versus a long-term rental. So, there in Florida, you can look at Craigslist, you can look at Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace. There might be some other notable websites too, to find what the monthly revenue would be for that, say, 3-bedroom condo. And on the flip side, again, we'd use like some type of software like AirDNA to figure out what's the average monthly revenue that this property would bring in for a short-term rental. And usually, to be honest, just like quick paper napkin math, nothing super fancy here, we look for the short-term rental revenue to be at least 3x what the long-term rental revenue would be. So for example, if that 3-bedroom condo somewhere in Florida there would do $1,000 a month as a long-term rental, we would look for it to do at least $3,000 a month as a short-term rental. Because like James mentioned, there's all these extra expenses. There's the disposables, there's cleaning fees, there's extra maintenance, there's guest communication. The list goes on. Airbnb takes a little cut, of course. So because of that, we want there to be a big enough spread between that long-term rental monthly income and what we could get as a short-term rental.
You've mentioned a couple times AirDNA. Why don't you talk a little bit about that for folks that don't know what that is? Is that a subscription service? If so, like what does it do for you and what are the fees, the cost of that?
Yeah, really cool tool. It's honestly for anyone that's looking to invest in a short-term rental property, I really got to recommend it. There are a couple, basically what it is that it's a data mining software. So essentially it's a website you can go to. You purchase a data set, and that can be for a city, it can be for a state, it can be for an entire country or the entire world. And so the price obviously varies depending on what data set you're getting. And it'll tell you it'll give you the market averages for that data set. So let's say we pick Orlando and we want to know how much the average 3-bedroom property or 4-bedroom property or 5-bedroom property in Orlando actually generates as a short-term rental property. We can see that using AirDNA, and we can see what the monthly fluctuations are going to be month to month, what the occupancy rate is going to be, the average nightly rate. And so we can see exactly how much that property would make. And then you can also go and dig in deeper on the map and actually look at specific comparable properties so that, not all 3-bedroom properties are created equal. You don't want to be comparing your 3-bedroom condo to some 3-bedroom mansion. So you can actually go in more qualitatively and look at the map, look at the actual properties. And so that's like our holy grail tool for actually understanding before we buy a property, how much it's going to earn. Because I think a lot of people kind of go in blind just thinking, oh, if I buy a property in Florida, everyone's going to want to vacation rent it because so many people vacation in Florida. But it's important, like Riley mentioned, not all properties are created equal. So we're always looking for ones that are actually going to be able to earn more as a short-term rental than a long-term rental and earn enough to make the investment worthwhile. And so if you're buying in a really rural market and you're buying an undesirable property, that might not be the case. But if you're buying a really desirable property in a hot spot, then it could be the case. And so that's a tool that we use to run those numbers.
So you're talking about different markets, and are you able to, or do you have any tools to help you assess supply and demand, like where you would more likely be successful and where you would stay away from?
Yeah, absolutely. So AirDNA is a really great tool for that because you can look at it gives you all kinds of data on the different markets. It also tells you like the relative demand and the increase in demand or increase in supply or decrease for that matter in any given market. There's a few other tools that are really good. We like there's one called STR Insights, like shorttermrentalinsights.com. That one gives some good insights into the data. Alltherooms.com is another one where you can get good data insights. Yeah, they're all good. And it just depends, like which one you use really just depends on what stage of the process you're at and what market you're looking at.
Talk a little bit about your financial bogeys. When you're looking at a deal and you're running the numbers through AirDNA and you're trying to figure out what the bottom line is going to be on a property, what are those bogeys that you try to hit? Is there anything back of the napkin type of calculations that you run to try to figure out whether it's a deal that's going to make sense or not?
For sure. Yeah. And I think this is something that, again, like so many people just, I don't know, at least at the beginner level, they might ignore. And, you just want to make sure that you know your numbers. That's the most important thing. And make the decision as analytically as possible. If you're making an investment, try to detach your emotions. We always like to say like 90% analytics and 10% intuition, leave a little bit of room for that intuition, that gut feeling. But the paper napkin method, the kind of surface level, again, we use what's called the 1.5% rule. So that's similar to like the 1% rule for long-term rentals. I think it's pretty well known. So 1.5% would be if we find the whole amount of monthly revenue on average for that short-term rental and divide it by the purchase price or expected purchase price of the property. That would be a little percentage there. And so if it's equal to or more than 1.5%, then we'll spend the extra time to put the whole data set right into the analysis spreadsheet. And that can take some time. That can take, an hour, even maybe 2 hours, depending on how difficult it is to get that information from the seller. So that's like just the one quick thing that we'll do. We'll also look for cash on cash return on investment to be equal to or more than 15%. So that's like just another bare minimum. And then another equation or metric that we'll look at is called total ROI. And that's when you take the old cash and cash ROI plus appreciation ROI and then equity ROI as well. So those three added together to give you the total ROI. We'll look at that to be at least equal to or more than 25%. So you kind of think of these like metrics as like the gauges in the hub of an airplane, and you're the pilot trying to fly this thing. And you want to make sure that those gauges you understand, you get them, and that way you can arrive safely. So otherwise, if you don't really know, you're kind of flying blindfolded, and it can be pretty dangerous.
So talk a little bit about how you see the Airbnb market now. You know, Florida hotels died for a while, and now they've come back strong and they're building more, and Airbnb is growing also. And how do you see it all moving forward?
Yeah, it really moving forward. Like I said originally, I think in Florida, it's quite the unique space because it's one of those markets where it's so well established. In so many parts of North America, the short-term rental industry came about because of Airbnb. Like if you look at for example, New York, right? No one short-term rented their place in New York before Airbnb came along, or hardly anyone. And so many markets around the US are like that. But Florida and I think another one that stands out is Hawaii are like two real big exceptions to that rule, where short-term rentals, like I remember as a kid, you know, we would always go to a short-term rental property for a couple of weeks a year in Florida. We'd go, and like snowbirds would always do that. You'd always do a vacation rental because, you know, your family's not going to stay in a hotel for a couple of weeks. You want a place with a pool, a backyard, that sort of thing. And then Airbnb kind of lit the fire on it and put more fuel on that fire. But it's just such a well-established market that there's pros and cons that come along with that. So going forward, what we're seeing is that because it's so much more well-established, there's much more robust regulation in the area than in a lot of other places. So you see that like Florida has kind of been dealing with this thing called short-term rentals for quite a while. So they've actually got really well thought out regulations and restrictions around who can operate them, where they can operate them, how they can operate them. So you don't see as much volatility there. You also have like tons of demand because there's so much demand for people traveling there. So you get a much more stable market in a number of ways, like regulations and demand in general. But because of that, you also get a lot more people being attracted to that stability and therefore buying more properties down there. And so you also get this increase in competition. So if you know how to operate the short-term rental property really, really well, then you kind of get the best of both worlds because you get this stability of the market, but you can also just beat the competition and not really be too worried. On the flip side, if you're just getting started and you don't really have any of the tools or strategies to be able to really optimize the property, then the benefit of stability is often outweighed by that increased competition because you're just going to end up in the bottom part of the market and you're probably not going to do that well. So you get all this stability, but it's stable, mediocre performance because you're just not up to par with the competition there.
I think when I speak with investors and they are considering the vacation rental route, the two primary objections that I hear, and you guys might hear some other ones, are one, they don't understand how to market it. That's issue number one, because it's distinctly different from long-term rentals. Obviously, there's Airbnb and VRBO and a lot of plethora, but it just seems overwhelming to people. You got to get your properties out on all these sites, and it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of time. The other thing is the PETA factor. You guys heard of the PETA factor?
Yeah.
Stephen, you know what a PETA is? We're not talking about what you stick in a falafel.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
The PETA is
I was starting to salivate already.
A pain in the choose your anatomy. A pain in the that's what a PETA is. That's the PETA factor.
Yeah, and that's a lot of work.
The PETA factor with Airbnb is that there's a turnover averaging every 2 to 3 days. And there's always something. They broke a towel rack. The air conditioning's out. There's not enough towels. Something happened with name it, the heater on the swimming pool, and dealing with these things. So how do you talk to folks that might want to get involved, and maybe there's other objections too that you hear from investors, and how do you talk them through so they understand and get a better comfort level for overcoming these objections?
Yeah, I can kind of tackle the marketability, and I'll let Riley tackle the management side of things and like getting rid of that PETA factor, if you will. As far as the marketability goes, yeah, honestly, like It's not a lot of work. It's just you got to put your time and energy into the right stuff. I think a lot of people focus on the wrong stuff and they waste a lot of time and they kind of spin their wheels. And what I always tell people is like, don't list on a whole bunch of platforms. There's really one platform that beats out all the others, and that's Airbnb. And you can later on down the road, once the property's up and running, it's going really well, you can go and list on VRBO. You can go and list on booking.com. You can get a direct booking website going. But I find that most people, they'll go and list on Airbnb and they'll do it with like mediocre photos, a pretty bad listing description, a pretty bad headline. Their pricing's all out of whack. And then they go and they multiply that like dumpster fire of a listing out to multiple platforms, expecting that that's going to solve their problem. And it's not. Like once you actually get it operating effectively and you turn that into like this really well-oiled machine, then you multiply it. It's actually really, really easy to multiply it. It's like a couple buttons you click if you have the right tools to just literally expand it out into multiple platforms. And because you've already optimized it really well, it's going to actually amplify your results. So I always recommend people like, don't overcomplicate it when you're getting started. Don't, try to get from A all the way to Z. Just get from A to B. Focus on getting that listing up on Airbnb. And there's a few things that are like not overly complicated, but that are really important. Like get a professional photographer. Don't go in there with your smartphone thinking that you're going to take good professional quality photos. So get a professional photographer. Before that, hire a cleaner to come in and stage the property. Maybe get an interior designer to do some nice interior design on the property so it actually looks good. When you're putting the listing together, make sure you have a good, solid pricing strategy. You're not just like taking your best guess at what you should price it at. So there's a lot of really simple things that I think a lot of people overlook and they get kind of overwhelmed with on the marketing side. And then,
yeah, I would say same idea on that note on the operational side of the business. Like once you've listed the property and everything's set up, the day-to-day operations can get really hefty. Like it can be a very active business if you let it be. And, the worst thing that we hear from our clients is that they come in and they have a few properties. They have 3, 4, 5 properties and they're doing all the cleaning and it's a full-time job and they're worth more than $15 or $20 an hour. They're worth quite a bit more than that, but they're doing those things because they just don't have good systems and good people to do it for them. So the first thing you do is make sure that you have a really good cleaning checklist. Make sure that you have a good kind of standard operating procedure for what to look for, how to do it, how to fold the linens. We always like to kind of, take like towels and like roll them at the end of the bed with a little bit of chocolate, like a nice little decorative chocolate, the hotel effect. And it just looks good when the guest comes in. It's very welcoming. So you have like little things like that really dialed in, really well polished. And that's on like just the cleaning side. And then, for me, I think I waited for quite a bit longer than I should have to buy property because I thought that buying property meant that I had to be a handy person. I'm not handy at all. So the truth is, like, you don't have to be the one in the trenches. If there's the renovation, the furnishing, the day-to-day maintenance, like you really just want to find people to do that stuff for you. And so, yeah, that's the other thing is make sure that you're not the one going there and doing the maintenance checks and whatnot. And then lastly is guest communication for operation. So this is one for sure that I know like a few people that we started working with where they came in with over 5 properties and they're doing all the guest communication and their life's very reactive. Like they're out for dinner with like a spouse or a significant other and there they are on their little phone, like on the app, messaging people, messaging guests, dealing with, issues, having to call maintenance people and coordinate. And it's just a shit show. It's not good. It's not what you're looking for.
And this is the PETA factor that I'm talking about. So
yeah. So like when you buy a property, like for the most part, you're buying it to get this thing called cash flow. That's what a lot of people do, at least not everyone, but so you might be doing it for cash flow, and you usually think of cash flow as this passive residual income. But again, this business can be very active if you let it. So one thing that we've learned about guest communication is first, there's companies out there that are actually quite reasonable to do all your guest communication. Or second, if you want to keep it in-house, which we do, you can actually get like virtual assistants in countries where the relative income is quite a bit lower than in North America. And so that would look like a place like Eastern Europe or, Bosnia, Serbia, where the relative income there is, $4, $5, $6 an hour. And so, just one person there, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can plug and play them for a reasonable amount full time to oversee all the maintenance, all the cleaning, all the guest communication. Of course, you have to be at a certain level in your portfolio to do that, but there's actually quite a few people even on websites like Upwork or Fiverr. You can go on LinkedIn and find virtual assistants there, and you can find them actually priced per property. So there's some people that will charge even $100 to $200 per month for one property to do all the guest communication.
Is that through Upwork you'll find them?
Upwork, Fiverr, or LinkedIn. Yeah, those are three places to look.
So those are, I'm assuming, they're like networks. So there's somebody providing 24-hour customer communication support, and so you're really going to a company that, an offshore company that would provide that service. Is that accurate?
That's actually, I think, I'm glad you touched on that, because that's a common mistake I think people make. We found a lot more success having one person take care, who actually knows the property, knows the details about it, and who we know is a good communicator, and have them do guest communication for 8 hours of coverage in a day. Maybe you get, as you grow bigger, you get two people so you can cover more hours in the day, but 24 hours just isn't necessary. Like when I ran my property management company, we tested that. And we had enough properties that it kind of made sense, we thought, to do 24-hour coverage. But the reality is, in your local time, between like 10 p.m., say, and 4 a.m., no one's messaging with anything urgent. And if they ever do, like, you can have at scale, like a maintenance person who's there, like if there's ever an emergency, someone gets alerted to it. But the reality is those emergencies that actually need to be tended to between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. are very, very, very rare. They're few and far in between. So you're better off having one or two people taking care of guest communication and not getting as much coverage versus having it farmed out to like 13 different people who are going to get it at different times of the day and just to get that 24-hour coverage.
Interesting.
Okay, so guys, if people want to learn more about how to work the short-term rental market and want to contact you, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, I think the best place to start would be our website, bnbinnercircle.com. We've got all kinds of different resources on there, from like blog articles, videos, and they can reach out to us directly and get right in touch with us as well. So yeah, just check out the website, bnbinnercircle.com.
Awesome. Guys, are there anything else that you would like to touch on before we let you go today?
No, this has been great. I really appreciate getting kind of deep into the Florida side of things. It's a really interesting market. So yeah, I appreciate you guys having us on. It's been awesome to chat with you guys.
It's been terrific. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys. That was great.
Thanks to you as well.
I can talk to you soon.
So, Eric, that was James Svetec and Riley Oickle. Very interesting conversation. What were your thoughts?
I think for me, it was interesting to hear Canadian investors talk about the Florida market. It's a mature market, Florida, in terms of vacation rentals. And I think that's the big difference between Florida and a lot of the other nascent markets that are around the country, really around the world, that are embracing in the last 5 to 10 years vacation rentals. Florida's been at it for 20 years. And to hear that from someone outside, I mean, I always suspected it, but it's confirmed now from folks that would know. How about you, Stephen?
Yeah, what I thought was interesting is the way they've systematized it, and it's a real business. It's a niche market, and it can overwhelm you if you don't do it right. There's definitely a lot involved in it, but if you have the right systems and do your homework, it's actually something you can run remotely. And like they said, it's all about the numbers.
Yeah, it's and getting into it with your eyes open. I mean, we talked about the PETA factor, and I think most of the folks that I talked to are not in it. It's daunting to them. So it was interesting to hear how they break down from an operational standpoint, how they outsource that component of it. And I think that's probably the biggest problem that not just investors, but entrepreneurs have, is that they want to do everything. And it makes no sense. If you're trying to make whatever, pick the number, dollars per hour for the time that you're committing to something, why are you scrubbing a toilet? That doesn't make any sense. But then investors, entrepreneurs think, well, I'm not sure I have the money to be able to do that. We almost don't have the money to afford to not do that. And so, we covered that. I thought that was interesting how they, kind of break down and marginalize the PETA factor of owning the vacation rentals.
Yeah.
Stephen, those guys were great guests. We don't have a lot of discussion on vacation rentals. It's been about 18 months since the last vacation rental discussion we had. So it's good to get caught up on the vacation market. Other great guests, where can they find them?
Well, the place to go is visit our website, www.investfloridashow.com. And better yet, download the app so you can listen while you're mobile. We have great guests and a great library.
Guys, as always, we appreciate the time that you invest with us each and every episode. And until next time, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odom and Steven Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show.